last week was a quick change, and we are now in the series Rhythms. Finding rest for your soul is kind of the tagline that goes with it. The next 3 weeks we'll talk about work, rest, and worship, and how they all three go together. We typically think of them as three totally separate things. I have my job, this is where I do this. I have my rest, this is where I sleep, and then I have my worship, and that's, what we just did. It's that 20 minutes. This is where we have to worship, and that is a form of worship. That is not the all-encompassment of worship. Our work is not just the work we get paid to do. I mean, if we were honest, there's a lot of things that we don't get paid to do we'd rather not. Like, I'd rather not clean my house, or rather not have to clean my car all the time, or rather not have to do this or do that. Like, those are still work, right? I mean, does anyone think, I don't know, maybe you enjoy cleaning. Does anyone here, really love, vacuuming the floors? This is just so relaxing to me. This is rest. Right here, I don't need sleep. I could just vacuum all day. If you're that way, I got a house for you to vacuum. So come on over. But most of us, that's not where we find rest in our work. And today we're going to start with focusing on work and kind of what that means and how that can find into the rhythms. When I was, when I started at 20, I started working at Kraft. I worked in a manufacturer. I worked overnight. And my shift was 10:30 at night to 6:30 in the morning. I never worked overnights, but it was the last year that my mom was alive. And I took that job because my dad needed more help at home at night instead of just in the morning. So we moved our schedules around, so I took that job to help. And I found out that not only am I a bad sleeper at night, I'm a really bad sleeper when it comes to day sleeping. I don't know if anyone's ever tried to sleep during the day, on a consistent basis, but I was terrible at it. So I'd drive home, and I lived in Seymour, worked in Springfield, so it's equivalent to driving from, basically Springfield to here. Straight highway for the most part. You get on it, and you just hit the highway. So you get out of there, and I get home 7:10, 7:15, and there are times when I'd get home, and I wouldn't remember parts of the drive. You're like, I don't remember going through Portland, or I don't remember this part, or any of these sections. None of this is familiar to me. And that happened kind of on a regular basis. Not that I was falling asleep, but that my brain was just gone, basically. Because I was still driving, I didn't hit the bumps or anything, I didn't go off-road, but I just mentally tired and exhausted. So then I get home, I'd help with my mom for a little bit, then I'd probably go to bed 8:30, and then I'd wake up, at first I'd wake up at 11, 3 hours of sleep, and then you can't go back to sleep, because you can ask Kristen, I'm still not a person that can take naps. I get 3 a year. 2 of them are because I don't feel great, and the third one's just when I'm tired. And I've taken 1 this year so far, even with Asher. So that's how much of not a napper I am. So I get home, I'd wake up at 11. Then I got more used to it, and I'd sleep till noon, 1 o'clock. Occasionally, I'd sleep till 2 or 3. But the problem was on the weekend, I'd work Friday night, and I'd get done Friday night, and it's Saturday. At that time, Kristen I think she was in college. It was either a senior in high school or she was in college. And so I didn't do anything Saturday. I didn't sleep that morning. I'd stay up so I could sleep Saturday night and go to church Sunday morning. And then Sunday night, I'd stay up till 2 or 3 in the morning so I could sleep that time so I could go back to work Monday night. The problem wasn't just my rest, is that I had a terrible rhythm to my calendar. Now, if you took all the hours in a week, I probably slept 30, and that was what I survived on. So it's easy for us to fall into these weird patterns of work/rest/worship, and it sacrifices everything else. Because I was working then, but then I helped with my mom, and then I was at church, and then I was doing these other things. And if you combined everything, the personal time we spend working and everything else, it was probably more than half, if not close to 90 to 100 hours of my week, which a week has 168 hours. For anyone that doesn't know that number, just so you have that in your head, 168, if you're working 80 to 100 hours between home stuff and work and everything else, that's most of your time. So what do we do to find rest? What do we do when we try to find worship? What do we do when we're looking for something else to enjoy? So the first thing that I had to do I left overnights because I learned that I was just terrible at it. Like this isn't going to work for me. I spent a year there, and it actually, God took me off of overnights more so. I got laid off. So it wasn't more or less like I was smart enough to leave. It's like I make good money, I'll survive. Like I'll kill myself working overnights, but hey, I made good money doing it. God, I got laid off. So then I spent the next 6 months trying to figure out that, and then I went back to working kind of nights, not overnight, but I'd work like noon to 11, 4 days a week in a call center, and then I finally got my job I have now, which was days. I never really worked a day schedule until I went to my current job for United Healthcare. So it's totally different when you're like, I get to pick my own schedule. What do I want to work? So I started working 6 to 2:30 because I wanted to go apparently to the opposite spectrum. Let's work super early. And I found that when you get done, it's like, wow, the sun's still out, and what am I going to do? But it was finding that rhythm in my work life helped me find the rhythm in my rest. And that changed the way that I worship and the way that I viewed worship, because it's so hard to really work well or sleep well when you're completely tired. Like, I don't know if you've ever tried to. So my dad's always been a hard worker, 60 hours a week. Like, that's normal for him at his job, and if not more sometimes. 60 hours a week, and then he'd take care of my mom. Well, he couldn't find rest very often because that's what he did overnight. Then he went back to work and was doing the cycle. That he was so tired most of the time that we sat down to watch a movie that he was really looking forward to seeing, and he started to doze off during the previews, literally snoring during the preview, and Dad, hey, wake up. And he was just that tired. That was part of that life that we were in at that time, and there was just no rhythm to rest. So that's why this is such an important series. We have to balance the three. Not put them in their separate areas and say they have nothing to do with each other. They completely affect each other. They impact the way that we rest, or the way that we worship, and the way that we work. So today, our focus is working is an essential responsibility. So I'm not saying that working is not important. I'm not saying that we should be like, I'm not going to do anything. There's obviously different areas of work. Stay-at-home mom, no matter what anyone thinks, is a job. That's work. It's not like, oh, I'm just going to do whatever I want today. If you have ability to just be like, I'm not going to do anything today and it's no big deal, that's cool. Stay-at-home mom, that's work. If you're retired, that's work. If you're disabled, that's still work, because everything takes effort. So it's not that only paid jobs is an essential responsibility. Work is an essential responsibility. We have things that we have to do. If you ever vacuum, you ever clean anything, that's work. So we might have to expand our idea of what work is. For many years, many cultures, and many ideal beliefs were that only work that mattered was the work you got paid to do. And that is important, because I find that if I don't have money, other people that want money from me don't get that money, and then things just don't work out very well for me. This weird thing. My uncle always said that if people didn't want money from me, I wouldn't want money either. If we didn't have any bills to pay, we wouldn't try to make money. So I guess that makes sense. But work's an essential responsibility, but it does not have to separate us from our worship of God. No matter what your job is, if your job's doing security, if your job's in Chick-fil-A, if your job's sitting in an office by yourself in your basement, like me, it doesn't have to separate you from your worship of God. The hardest thing is, I listen to music a lot, or I like to listen to other pastors preach and some of those things while I'm working. When I was in office, I always had to remember, don't sing along. Because our office, everyone's working, so, and if you have headphones, and a lot of people did, it's dead quiet. You're that quiet? That's how quiet it was in that office all the time. When someone was talking 4 or 5 aisles away, they're like, shh. And it was usually me getting shh. I know that's hard to believe, but I was in that area. But so we're there, and there would be people that you'd have your headphones off, and you'd hear someone just start, there was one girl specifically that started shouting out the song, right? Shouting it out. And I don't remember what she was singing, but it was usually funny. So our worship is different areas. If you can sing in your job, you're driving down the road and you're singing along, that's part of your job, that's great. I can sing in my office and nobody cares. The dogs may leave the room, but that's okay. But it doesn't have to separate us from our worship of God. We don't have to look at this as my work job, and even though it's not a Christian job, It's totally separate. But that's not the way that we should view it. Working is an essential responsibility, and it doesn't separate us from our worship of God. The way we act, the way we talk to others, the way that we perceive others, the way that we pray sometimes during our job, all those are forms of worship of God. Our scripture we're looking at today is 2 Thessalonians 3, 6 through 15. So when we look at this scripture, it's written to the church in Thessalonica, and they kind of had a problem. It required 2 letters, that's why we're looking at the second one. This is the end of the second one. They were kind of, they were waiting for Jesus to come back, is what the shortest answer is. They decided that he's coming back soon, so we're not going to work, we're not going to do anything, we're just going to pray and wait for him to show up. He's coming back soon, so we're not going to do anything. And other people will provide for us and it'll be fun. I don't know if you've ever been in like a society where, or like a people group, like within your family or anything like that, where you put money in together. Servers at restaurants, sometimes they have to put all of their tips together and they split the tips evenly. The problem with that is, if you're a really good server and you make really good tips, then you're splitting with someone that's a really bad server, and there's no incentive for the person that's bad to be better because, well, it's all going to get split evenly, so it's no big deal. They were kind of running the same process. The people that were working really hard were also having to take care of the ones that weren't doing anything, and it wasn't because they were disabled or unable or anything else, it was because they chose not to. They're like, I don't feel like working today. I'm not going to work anymore. Or Jesus is coming back soon, so it doesn't matter if I work. It's no big deal. They took parts of Jesus' sermons to an extreme, so Paul is writing to them. And it's a tough thing to write to them, but he does it very clearly. With these verses, we'll start in verse 6, and it says, "And now, dear brothers and sisters, we give you this command in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ. Stay away from all believers who live idle lives and don't follow the traditions they received from us. For you know that you ought to imitate us. We were not idle when we were with you. We never accepted food from anyone without paying for it. We worked hard day and night, so we would not be a burden to any of you. We certainly had the right to ask you to feed us, but we wanted to give you an example to follow. Even while we were with you, we gave you this command: those unwilling to work will not eat. Yet we hear that some of you are living idle lives, refusing to work and meddling in other people's business." Verse 11 is very important. We hear some of you are living idle lives, refusing to work. But it's not just that they're not working. When they're not working, they're meddling in everyone else's business. No one likes that. Let's be honest. No one enjoys that part. We command such people and urge them in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ to settle down and to work to earn their own living. As for the rest of you, dear brothers and sisters, never get tired of doing good. Take note of those who refuse to obey what we say in this letter, so stay away from them, so they will be ashamed. Don't think of them as enemies, but warn them as you would a brother or sister. They're not the enemy. They're not the bad person, but we should warn them. Hey, like gossip. I think of people meddling in other people's business. The first thing I think of is gossip. And when you don't have anything else to do, gossip becomes a very attractive thing. Like, I'm not busy, so hey, did you hear about so-and-so? Did you hear this happen? Did you know this happened? Idle hands lead to the opposite. It's not an idle mouth thing. So we want to make sure of that. And he's being very clear. He's not saying, and he tells his brothers and sisters, never tire of doing good. So he's saying, keep taking care, keep helping, keep rebuking, keep guiding. But hey, you should work. You should do what you can. Help where you can. Do what you're able to do. So the first thing I think we have to understand, there has to be a healthy balance between work, rest, and worship. As we look through this series, it's the healthy balance. Because you can work too much. We call those workaholics. Most people, like I said, if we look through our calendar, 168 hours, how much of that do we spend working, resting, and worshiping? I think we spend a lot of time working because we got to. We got to make money, right? We got to pay bills. We have to. I wish we didn't have to. It'd be nice. But and Paul tells you, apparently that leads to doing things that we normally wouldn't do, such as gossip. but we have to work. So that's a portion of our lives that we have to do. You have to take care of your home. You have to take care of where you live. For me, if I don't work, I'm not supporting my family. If I don't have an income, that's, Asher, without food, you get, babies are expensive. Rest. It's so important to be able to find rest. As someone who is very, very poor at finding rest in sleep, I find rest in other ways. Not all of us actually rest the same. Some people need 5 hours of sleep. Some people need 10. Some people, what energizes me isn't sleep. Sleep doesn't. I wake up tired. Go to sleep tired, I wake up tired. You know what energizes me? Doing things I enjoy. So a day a week, I try to do something, at least for a little while, that kind of frees my mind and frees my space. For me, I love playing or tinkering with cars or hanging out with other car people, looking at cars, car stuff. That's my rest for me. And that seems ridiculous to a lot of people because that sounds exhausting. You mean you want to spend your time resting, working on something? Yes, because I enjoy that. Kristen's idea of rest is very much entrenched in sleep. And that's okay, especially right now. But even before baby, pre-pregnancy, she was a 9-10 hour sleeper. She was really good at taking naps. That's her form of rest. But when she's awake, she's going. She's moving. She's doing stuff. I need to do this. I need to do that. And it's not like an exhaustive way, but that's just her normal behavior. And her mom and her grandmas are both the same way. We'll be at her grandma's house. It's 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock at night. She goes around dusting little things in the house. Well, we do a little bit every day. It doesn't take very long to do it. That's how that goes. It's her family balance. So we have to find that. How much of it do we spend actually resting versus worshiping? Because I think if we look at it, we spend a lot of time resting, we spend a lot of time working, and they take up the bulk of our time, but how much is geared towards worshiping God? And that can be through prayer, that can be through reading His Word, that can be through music and actual worship, that can be talking about Him to other people. How much of our time do we spend? 168 hours a week. We're at church for an hour, and let's say, you do some other extra stuff. Say it's a couple hours, right? You're here for Sunday school, you're here for worship. That's 2 hours out of 168. What else do we do through the week? Well, we spend about 30 seconds praying before our meals. We might say a quick prayer when we wake up and when we go to bed, if we remember to. So let's say you do a minute on each side. That's still 14 minutes. We're at 2 hours and a quarter. How much do we spend in worship? So part of it's going to be finding that healthy balance. The beautiful thing about worship, our worship time that we have before services, that's a time that we specifically have set aside to worship God. It's not with the other distractions. Because in our work weeks, I don't know about you, but when I try to do something, I'm trying to be intentional. I'm trying to pray, and if I'm doing it when I'm at work, I'm struggling with something, I'm trying to pray. That's when someone messages me. That's when someone calls me. That's when someone needs me. It's distracting. But during worship, we have that time. It's set aside. Our phones are usually put away, and it's on silent or whatever. If it's not on silent and it rings, and we usually try to put it on silent pretty fast. So that's what we're trying to do. But when we're in that time, it's that time that you have specifically with God to worship, to listen, and to hear. But when we do that, it's kind of the same with a relationship. If you're married or if you're engaged or you're in a relationship, you have to spend one-on-one time with each other. You have to listen to each other. You have to talk to each other. Whether if it's a little bit of time because that's all you have, or if it's a lot of time, you spend time with the other person because you're trying to hear, understand, and be with them. God wants that same relationship from us. He wants that balance of undivided attention. And worship gives us that. But then it doesn't just end there. We can worship as we go out and we're in our cars and we sing along to music, as we pray, as we lead with other people. So we need to find that healthy balance. The other thing is, I think that this week we're talking about the thing that's the necessary frustration. And I call work that. Work's the necessary frustration because we have to have it. We have to work, Paul says if you don't work, you don't eat. And that's kind of the way I was raised too. If you don't work, you don't eat. That was my dad's. I don't remember my dad ever not working. I remember him getting laid off or a company closed that he worked for, and he had a job the next week, was working somewhere else, was going. I don't remember this specifically, but I remember my dad telling me when they moved here from Texas, the only job he could find was washing dishes at a diner. making like $2 and some change. This was a while ago, but that's not very much money. And he's like, it wasn't very much money. But he said, but I had to work because I had to support my family. So he's like, I did that for a couple of weeks, so I found a better job. So work's a necessary frustration. It's something that we have to deal with. But the other side of it is our worship isn't totally separate from our work. So even though we may view work as a necessary frustration, it's that thing that we wake up and on Mondays, I have to go to work today. Or if you work a different schedule, maybe it's Sunday nights, or maybe it's Tuesdays, or whatever your first day of the week is, I have to go to work today. Right? I don't know very many people, I rephrase it, I don't know very many people that are like, I get to go to work today. Yes! I'm going to be the best at whatever I'm doing. And what's funny is, most of us have prayed for that job that we have now. Right? You ever done that? God, I really need this job. Please give me this job. Then you get the job that you prayed for, that you told God you wanted. Then you're in that job and you're like, oh, I don't want to go to work today. I hate this job. This is the worst job in the world, or whatever. I learned, so I worked at United Healthcare and I left for 6 months to be a manager for Mexican Villa. A lot of people don't know that part, that I left in the middle of it. I worked for United Healthcare for 9 months, and I left because I needed to make more money. Kristen was going back to nursing school, and I had to do something. Again, work's the necessary frustration. I worked for Mexican Villa for about 6 months, and United Healthcare hired me back. Because even though I thought things were terrible at United Healthcare, I learned very quickly that they were much worse working for Mexican Villa than it was for them. And the reason that was is because if anyone's a restaurant manager, they know the work's not done until the work's done. If it's 50 hours, if it's 60 hours, if it's 70 hours, if you work every shift open and close, you do what you have to do. So when I went back, fortunately they gave me a raise when I went back to United, so I actually made more going back, and it worked out. But man, I prayed for the job that I have now, or the job that I had a few years ago, and then as I've moved around a little bit. And each time I prayed for that job, so then I kind of get reminded sometimes by God, when I complain about my job, or if I complain about my job, you remember you prayed about this job? You remember you asked for this job? This is what you wanted? This is what you were looking for. So even though maybe a necessary frustration in our lives is something that we do have to do and we have to endure at times, it's also something that sometimes it was what we asked for. It was what we prayed for. It's what we wanted. And the other side of it is, how much of our work do we spend working diligently? And that's where we go forward and being good stewards. So we're at work. An average person works 40 hours a week. My dad always says, he remembers his first part-time job when you talk about 40 hours a week. And if anyone owns their own business or works their own business, understands that there's 40 hours is chump change. They can probably spend a lot more time doing everything else than that. But the average person works a 40-hour work week. How much of that work week that we have 40 hours do we spend actually working? I mean, if we're trying to be good examples and we're using our work through worship of God, how much of that time is spent really focusing on our work or on God or on ourselves to look through there, or how much of it do we spend on social media, on Facebook and Instagram, or talking to someone else, or just being busy, right? Anyone else know busybodies in the workplace? People that spend more time and more effort to look busy, to appear busy, to appear like I'm working really hard, but they're not doing anything. They spend more work doing that than they would if they just did their job. How much of our time do we spend? And if you're curious, the average person, I told Darren this a few months ago, the average person on a 40-hour work week works 27 to 30 hours a week. And that's acceptable. That's the acceptable number. 27 to 30 hours a week. That means 25 to 30% of everyone's job, they're not working. Does that blow anyone else's mind? If I'm the business owner, I own the business, and I'm standing up there thinking, okay, here's the expectations, here's the rules, and then you're paying somebody to work, if you make $10 an hour, you're paying, and there's a third of their time, literally $130 a week of their paycheck is for doing nothing. It's for Facebook, Instagram, posting. I love the people that post while they're at work complaining about their job. I don't know if you've ever done that before, but please don't. My favorite one is one of my friends posted saying, I hate my job, I need to find something else. And his manager commented on there, you need to get back to work. Because this happens. And then the funny part is, wait, why was your manager on Facebook at while you were at work too? Like, does this kind of go around? Maybe he was on a break. I don't know. But if we're going to be good stewards, if you're a Christian and you're in the workplace, I think our work ethic should be higher than those that whatever's considered to be usual. Like, one of the things that I know has helped me, because I've worked for United Healthcare as a total when I originally started 7 years, almost 7 years now, and I've had 5 positions. And it's not because I was like, oh, I'm going to do something else. It was because I wanted to work hard and I wanted to do my job really well. Part of it is because I'm a perfectionist and I believe in being great at everything I do. If I can't be great at it, I got to figure out how to be great at it. And if I still can't figure it out, then maybe I'm not supposed to do that. Like, that's the way my brain works. But if we spend our time, and we're spending most of our time doing other things, how much of it, because even then, the 27 hours that you work, how much of that's distraction free? Are you sitting there thinking, oh, I wonder if they message me back? Did they do this? Did they do that? So if we want to be good stewards of what God's given us, that's our work. I mean, if we prayed for our job, God gave you this job. It's something for us to be responsible in. But I also think it's a good witness to others. Hey, you work diligently. Sometimes that's rewarded. It should be rewarded more than being busy, looking busy, trying to be busy. The thing that we have within our work also is purposeful chaos. Because we believe that being multitaskers is the best form of work, right? You hear this, well, I'm a multitasker. I can do 6 things at once. Great. One of my friends always told me, I love to challenge multitaskers. You do 3 things at the exact same time, and I'll do those 3 things separately, individually, and see who gets done faster and more accurate. Because multitasking, I have 30 windows open on my computer at work all the time. Multitasking doesn't mean you have these things up and you're going back and forth because you're researching, you're finding an answer, you're looking for this. Multitasking is doing 2 completely separate tasks, such as carrying on a conversation while writing an essay. You ever tried that? Try talking to someone and writing something on a computer at the same time. See how many times the words that you're writing or saying get said or wrote down. It gets mixed up. It does. It happens. Even for me. I work in call centers. I'm talking to people. I'm typing. I would fix myself whatever I was typing half the time. It's oh, that's not what I meant to say. That's what I'm saying, not what I'm typing. Or what I'm thinking. Purposeful chaos. We think that it's this cool thing to be multitaskers and be busy and try to do as many things at once. But we're not really doing any of them well. We're just looking at it and thinking, oh, this will be great. This will be fun. We'll try it this way. And then it's a complete disaster. So put aside whatever we think may be useful. I mean, if your job requires multitasking to some extent, I believe most jobs do. But I don't think it's the true form what we consider multitasking is actually multitasking. Because I can type and I can listen to people and I can do different things. Okay, but it's not great. If I typed it, I could be a lot faster than if I'm trying to say something. If I'm talking to someone, I'm doing something with them and I'm moving into another role, that's totally different. But we can put aside whatever we think is the chaos, whatever things that this makes us look better. Because they don't. I really don't think they help us in the long run. And that's where we have to understand that the chaos that we see is that it's kind of this badge of honor that we wear. I'm sleep deprived because I've worked 70 hours this week. Anyone ever said something like that? Oh, if you only knew how many hours I worked this week, it was so exhausting. I just did this. I worked 30 hours of overtime because I remember when I was at Hardee's and I worked 125 hours in 2 weeks because we had so many people quit. And I was in high school. Worked 125 hours in 2 weeks, and people are like, how did you do that? Or why did you do that? Well, it's summertime, so I'm not in school, and I need to buy car parts. So, extra money. That was my whole motivation for it. But what they saw, the people I worked with, was he's a good worker, and he's dedicated because he's showing up and he's helping out wherever he can. It's not about the chaos. It's not about multitasking. It's not about working as much as we can or doing these crazy things that we consider badges of honor. Literally, in most workplaces, it's how many hours that you put in is a thing of significance. Not because it's oh, that's cool. It's look, I did this. That's cool, but really, what did you do with the rest of your time? What have you enjoyed? Have you found rest? And that's where we have to find that healthy balance. Work is the number one biggest balance issue out of all three of them. I don't care who you are, you spend more time working than you do resting. If you don't, I want you to keep track this week if you don't believe me. Your work hours, your hours working on stuff around your house, hours working on stuff with your family, car, whatever it may be, stuff that's not like the enjoyable stuff. Vacuuming, sweeping, mopping, changing the oil, anything like that, because I don't consider that enjoyable. I was working in my car, changing the oil is not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the fun stuff, like putting on a new set of wheels or something like that. That's okay, but I don't want to go out there and change the oil or transmission fluid. Like that's, yippee, you have to. But write down all of the hours that you spend working, and then write down the hours that you spend actually resting. Sleep, doing something you enjoy. Because watching TV or any of that is not rest. Because watching TV rarely energizes us. Watching TV, sitting in front of the TV, you know what that usually causes us to be? More tired, more exhausted. And like they say, the best thing to do before you go to sleep is actually to read. It's not watch TV, it's not play video games or read on your phone. It's to read a book. It helps your mind relax. And they say that our use of mobile devices helps interact with our brains, basically, and causing us to have sleep deprivation issues where we can't sleep because we're like stuck on our phone all the time. So if we want to find the balance, we have to see what's weighing down everything else. And again, that doesn't mean that we put aside our responsibilities. Work is an essential responsibility. But maybe it's finding that time instead of, okay, well, I work 60 hours with work, with everything else I do around the house. Say it's 60 hours, and you sleep 8 hours a night, so that's 70 hours. We'll just round it. So then you still have 34 hours or 38 hours. What are you doing with that time? Most of us can't find anything that we did with that time. Well, we watched TV, we hung out, maybe we drove, whatever it is. But what do we do to really find rest? And what do we do to find worship? And that's what we have to understand. Working hard doesn't mean resting less. It doesn't mean that, because I'm a hard worker, it means that I'm going to work until I can't work anymore. And we know plenty of people that work like that. One of the guys at my old church was retired from the railroad, and it was literally nonstop work the entire time he worked for them. 8 hours on, 8 hours off, his entire life for 25 years. 8 hours on, 8 hours off, except for vacations. And he didn't take very many of them. Was it a great paying job? Yeah. How much family time did he get? Not very much when he was working. It was constant work, sleep, work, sleep, work, sleep. And he was usually kind of deprived in both. And it's not an easy job either, not when he was doing it, especially. But working hard doesn't mean resting less. Just because you work hard doesn't mean you have to be sleep deprived, you can't have any rest, you can't enjoy things. Working hard means setting aside time to rest. I had to purposely set aside time where I'm going to do this 2-hour block, even if it's a small block of time, say I'm going to do this and I'm going to have a good time. Because believe it or not, to most pastors, Sundays really aren't days of rest. It's kind of a day of work to a lot of pastors, especially ones that have morning and night services. So it's not really my day where I'm like, I'm just going to relax today, because it's not always relaxing, because it's more important to do God's work than any other work. I believe that. No matter what we do in the church, the job that we do here is more significant than what we do in our day job. Do we put it in the same effort to do what we do here as we do in our day job? So what I try to do is I try to find some time on Saturday, spend time with family, spend time with friends, something of those lines where this is my time where I'm going to try to do nothing else. And what you'll find, if you set aside that time to rest, you'll find two things. One, you're going to have to work to keep that distraction free. Like last year when we were on vacation was when the Ride the Ducks accident happened. That's when we were on vacation. That kind of interrupts your vacation when something that catastrophic happens in your hometown. So it'll be interrupted when you set aside that time. Find a way what you'll do, how you set it up. Another thing that you'll find is you'll be more energized for everything else that you do because you set aside that time. Because if we never rest, you never do anything to your full potential because you're always exhausted, you're always tired, you're always wore out. But if you find this is what I enjoy and this is the balance in it, it changes the way we do everything else. But when it's imbalanced, we won't work well, we won't rest well, and we won't worship well. So finding the balance is what we'll be focusing on the next 3 weeks of this series. Today's work, today's the least fun of the three. But I think it's the most important because it takes up the most of our time out of all three of them. We're going to spend more time doing stuff than we are laying down or resting. For most of us. And maybe our imbalance is on rest. And we spend a lot more time sleeping than doing anything else. And this, sleeping more causes more issues with sleep and work. It just makes you more tired. But as we find the balance, we'll find that our life will allow ourselves to enjoy other things more because we're not wearing ourselves out completely in one area. So as the worship team comes, I know this is it's a different sermon series, and this isn't going to be one that's going to have a huge ending, but this is one that'll have a huge impact to our lives. Because the way that we worship, the way that we work, the way that we rest is going to impact everything else we do. No matter how much we say, oh, it doesn't bother, it doesn't affect it, it will. So we need to find that time to specifically go and specifically do nothing, to rest, to do what we enjoy, or we'll enjoy nothing. So if everyone will stand with me, I'm going to ask everyone to bow their heads with me, and we're going to pray before the worship team plays